It is such a pleasure to welcome two distinguished guests at the Ukrainian Institute of Modern Art, Professor Magocsi and Professor Yohanan Petrovsky-Shtern. We are thrilled that you are here, and we are also very excited to be presenting this exceptional exhibit. The artist is here, Yohanan Petrovsky-Shtern, and we will then proceed to talk about the current situation with the war, with Ukraine, the United States, and what the paintings in this exhibit represent. So, Professor Magocsi, I would like to ask you, first of all, what is your impression of these extraordinary works of art, and especially as they represent the suffering of the war and what war means, not only in Ukraine, but universally, as these paintings represent historic past and the current situation in Ukraine?
Well, I guess first my reactions are very fresh because I'm looking at these paintings for the first time. And one didn't know what to expect in terms of the subject matter. And I guess, alas, true art reflects life. And what we are reminded of is that life and existence is full of tragedy. In a sense, one can think, what is the norm, tragedy or a peaceful existence? And so when one first sees virtually every one of these tableaus, one is emotionally upset.
Professor Magocsi, you are an eminent representative of the academic community, an author, an analyst, a historian, a political analyst as well. Can you make some comments now about the present situation of the war, this invasion of Russia on Ukraine, and how you see this developing, and including the future, including the fact that it's the 75th anniversary of NATO now?
The amount of commentary that has existed ever since the second phase of the war that began in 2022, because we know it began really in 2014, numerous people more insightful, more intelligent than I in various countries have provided an enormous amount of commentary and perhaps insight. But of course, none of us know what the future can bring or will bring. But I would say, at least from my gut instinct, is that in the last decade in particular, that the world has changed, Europe has changed, and that I think there are two things that are certain. Ukraine is now fully embedded, as it had always been, but not necessarily politically, within Europe and within the mindset of Europe, both from the standpoint of Ukrainians themselves and from the rest of the European continent. Certainly the position of countries like, and not only countries, but civilizations like French and German that always looked with skepticism on Ukraine, now that is no longer there. What configuration it is going to have, difficult to say, we don't know that. But Ukraine will remain as a distinct political entity, as a distinct people and culture that, as you've just said, will never give up. You're absolutely correct, and the rest of the world knows that. But when we no longer have a shooting war, Ukraine as a country will be, in many ways, like Israel, forever and ever, in a permanent state of war. Why? Because they're in a neighborhood in which at least one, I mean, they're a little bit better off than Israel, but at least one of the neighbors just simply will never really be a neighbor. I mean, that's a given. So if one were going to look at the future, that, I think, is what the future will be. Ukraine will be, without question, but also have to be in a permanent state of war.
It's interesting, your comparison of Ukraine with Israel, and the two characteristics, obviously, a strong sense of identity in both countries, a educated population, the technology, knowledge and technology at a very high level in both countries, and the importance of education. I'm always impressed with the tradition, the Jewish tradition of respect for teachers, respect for education, because there's a understanding that without education you don't have a future. And for Ukraine, this is what needs to be understood now, that it is the young generation that is going to rebuild Ukraine and that's going to be able to keep its independence next to a very dangerous and rapacious neighbor.
Well, one of the things that I think has already occurred, you've in a sense suggested that, is in contrast to other European countries, and this includes the reputable ones through history, like France or England or Germany, the general level of education among Ukrainians is quite high. This is one of the reasons why during this period when we have millions of refugees in various parts of Europe, Ukrainians, the Europeans, and I know this because I live a significant amount of time each year in France, Europeans are, I don't know if I should say shocked, but they're certainly terribly and pleasantly surprised about the talent of these Ukrainians, their ability to and desire to work hard and honestly, and their generally high level of knowledge, both in the technical sphere as well as in the humanities. I mean, like, who are these people, right? So, in a sense, a basis already exists. Of course, no basis can continue to exist unless that tradition of love of knowledge, learning in all spheres, not just simply technical and business, it must continue. And so all of the institutions within Ukraine and outside of Ukraine, and since Ukraine is part of Europe, students can move from the rest of Europe, study in Ukraine, from Ukraine to other countries. that must continue, and one way of that to continue is part of the reconstruction process of maintaining institutions and expanding them in Ukraine.
Thank you for your words, and I am left with a very positive feeling about the future. Despite the current situation, I am quite positive that Ukraine is going to be victorious, and I want to thank you for coming to Chicago and sharing your thoughts with us and visiting our Ukrainian Institute of Modern Art. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Thank you.